All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Independent Podcast. I'm here with Ryan Early. Ryan is a farmer, a businessman, and a hemp advocate. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being on the podcast. I'm a huge advocate of hemp. And so when I heard you speak on another podcast, I knew I wanted to have you on. And if you can you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of where you grew up? What led you to getting into the hemp industry?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fernando, for having me on the show. Very happy to be here. My journey started a long time ago. I was born and raised here in Oklahoma City. Lived here all my life. Had never lived outside the state or really outside of Oklahoma City. I found cannabis at an early age. About the age of 13, I was diagnosed ADD, ADHD, which is a very common diagnosis. They wanted to give me Ritalin, and of course now it's Adderall and all the other bad stuff, to try to make it normal.
Right.
I found cannabis, and I found that it calmed my anxiety. I found that it calmed my stomach and my nerves in the morning, which is a genetic issue that my father and his father and even my kiddos all suffer from, is a type of Crohn's, but not Crohn's disease. And so that kind of led me to my pathway of going, okay, maybe the doctors in the pharmaceutical industry doesn't have my best interest at heart if they're not willing to look at the root cause and go to natural solutions first before we just jump straight to the prescription pad. And later in life, I graduated high school here in Choctaw, Oklahoma. Began plumbing, got a job at a local plumbing contractor, and was very blessed to have a mentor that would not just teach me how to do my job, but teach me how to run a company. And at 21, I got my contractor's license, went into business for myself, opened my first plumbing company, and specialized uniquely in water purification, engineering those systems later on in my career, and began developing and implementing chromatography systems for removal of certain contaminants, chromium, cadmium, mercury. Many of those are found in common municipality water sources. And so avidly seeking ways to clean up and purify our water, transgressed later in my career. In about 2014, I started making CBD oil for my niece and a few other kiddos that were combating pediatric epilepsy, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and several other debilitating and even deadly disorders. After about a year of that, I began working with some of our local legislators to draft legislation, which ultimately became Katie's Law, legalizing CBD in Oklahoma with a physician's recommendation and only under the care of a licensed physician. And that allowed me to open my first cannabis business or hemp business, Cantech Labs, in early 2016. After the passage of Katie's Law, we were able to begin manufacturing those products under a license from the Department of Agriculture and Department of Health in Oklahoma, specifically providing products for Katie's Law under that physician's recommendation. Subsequently, I began writing legislation that would allow access to all Oklahomans to CBD without a doctor's recommendation. And that House Bill 1559 was passed in early 2017. And from there, it kind of just did a hockey stick, right? We began manufacturing for other brands. We still manufacture today for about 90 brands nationwide. Oh, wow. Some very well-known brands. And I didn't stop there. I continued writing legislation, furthering the state agenda to allow us to cultivate hemp in Oklahoma. And so House Bill 2913 was drafted in early 2018, and that ultimately allowed us to passed in April of 2018, and that allowed us to go to individual companies to partner with local universities to conduct hemp research under a 2-year pilot program study. And I partnered with Northwestern Oklahoma State up in Alva, Oklahoma. They saw the value in the plan that I laid out to them. And that plan was a project called Project Hemp for Victory. Among research, while we were writing the legislation, I began to find that Oklahoma was part of a very unique Black Ops covert mission, if you will, by the U.S. government.
Yeah.
In 1938 and 39, they went all over the world and collected cannabis, some marijuana, some hemp, but cannabis. At that time, we didn't really know what medical marijuana was, right? It was really a slandering campaign against the plant on behalf of the paper companies, the chemical companies, and big oil. And then pharmaceutical companies jumped on that bandwagon as well. However, when they came to Oklahoma with all of this different cannabis from all over the world, the reason they chose Oklahoma was because of its 7 unique microclimates. We have very similar climates to nearly every region in the world, from subtropical to nearly subtropical, down by Louisiana, Texas border, up to desert applications in Northwest Oklahoma and everything in between. So it made a perfect kind of proving ground, if you will, to see what was going to do best in our environment here in America and what was going to produce the best long strand fiber. Because we know that in those days, our ships' riggings, our sails, our flags, our sailors' clothing, all of that was made from hemp. And the history books don't really reflect that. It's been written out of them almost.
I even think the Constitution was written on hemp. I think. I could be wrong.
Yes, sir. You are 100% correct, as well as our first flag. So hemp is a much more durable material. It can be wet and dried many more times and maintain its molecular structure versus cotton or other synthetics now. Many ropes that are still around from centuries ago are there because they're hemp, not because they were polyester. So Project Hemp for Victory, knowing that the government came to Oklahoma, brought all of this cannabis. We had no idea how much at this time, but knowing that they were here and that the farmers were, growing up here, we knew there was ditchweed on the sides of the roads up in northern Oklahoma and patches in farmers' fields down in southern Oklahoma that I used to bale hay on and knew that it used to grow on the back fence. And of course, when we were teenagers, we'd run back there, pick us a big old trash bag full, and wouldn't do anything but give you a headache, right? Thought we were doing something cool, but it was just hemp. There was no THC in it, very little THC in most of it. And so ultimately we collected 114 genetically diverse cultivars from all over the state. And I'm sure there's more that I missed. That was a pretty good 2-year gathering. And out of those, we have found some amazing things that I definitely was not on the hunt for even. And one of the most unique genetic traits that we found was a plant growing on the Kansas border had produced 0 THC and 0 CBD, which is very uncharacteristic of any cannabis plant because they all have one of those 2 compounds. And this one had none. It did, however, have 6 unique chemical sesquiterpenes, biochemical sesquiterpenes. We also call them essential oils or essences of plants. And this specific sesquiterpene makeup was the same makeup as nearly all invasive pests on Earth excrete when they die as a pheromone or when they're injured to warn other insects to stay away. There's danger. Don't come over here. And when we started researching this same sequence all over the world, from squash bugs to mosquitoes to gnats to no-see-ums to chiggers, fleas, the list goes on and on and on. And we're running studies with Auburn University, Clemson University, and of course Northwestern Oklahoma State to advocate and to identify exactly what each one of those insects' responses to this plant-based pheromone, and the results are astounding, literally staggering in the response we're seeing as a DEET replacement for mosquitoes and other flying insects, all the way to it holding extremely potent antifungal properties.
Wow.
And part of the patent, which we were awarded in 2020, does designate it as a fungicide, as a repellent, and also as a plant vitality booster. What we're getting back in some of these studies when Blue Magic is applied is that it's actually reducing water requirements, it's reducing fertilizer requirements, and the plant is healthier than if we were keeping those at standard levels.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, holds extremely powerful potential for the future of organic farming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of a lot of people don't realize, hemp has so many different functions. One of the things that I've heard is how much carbon it captures and puts that carbon right back into the soil. And I'm over here in San Diego, but you're in Oklahoma. From my understanding, is we're having a problem losing our topsoil, and this is a great way to help rebuild our topsoil. Give it some life, and also gather carbon that if somebody's a believer in climate change, would help reduce the effects of climate change.
Absolutely. Cannabis, I've done quite a bit of studies. I actually worked with the University of Arkansas back in 2018 and 19 on doing some phytoremediative studies and bioremediative studies using hemp combined with different enzymatic products as well as bacterialistic products to absorb not just negative carbon out of the air, but also some of the heavy metals and toxic buildup down on the eastern side of our state, where a lot of the Tyson chicken facilities are.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's a lot of nitrates and a lot of phosphates that come out of those, meat production, food production, chicken facilities, pigs, cattle, and they have contaminated a lot of the area down in Cherokee County. Yeah. And so we did some studies on the phosphate side of uptake, as well as heavy metals over at an abandoned salvage yard that, of course, had every bad chemical and heavy metal laden in the soil you can imagine from years of abuse. Yeah. And actually developed some LD50s, some lethal dose limits on some of those compounds like lead, cadmium, mercury. Oh, wow. In specific strains of hemp, and identified which strains were able to pull more, remediate more of those bad compounds out, and at the same time be able to sustain life and not die from the toxic, uptake. Yeah. And so, yes, hemp has the potential to clean our air, clean our soil. And we even had a program running where there was a contaminated water reservoir out on the eastern side of the state. And they were actually flooding the fields below stream with that reservoir and then letting that dry as a way of abating that, contamination from the water, and then planting hemp over the top of it 2 cycles per year to draw the heavy metals back out.
Wow.
Pretty unique in the building materials, the carbon negative footprint houses that are being built now with hempcrete and hemp wood, all the way to hemp resin and fiberglass. I'm working with a company right now on their patent applications, because they have literally produced a fiberglass resin and fibers using hemp that is 3 times as strong as traditional fiberglass, as strong as carbon fiber Kevlar, and as light as carbon fiber Kevlar. However, it is ecologically biodegradable in less than 6 years versus 6,000 years for fiberglass. And a perfect example of that is the windmill blades. Yeah. Big fiberglass blades. The lifespan of those blades is about 3 to 5 years. And it takes about 60,000 years for those to break down.
Oh, wow.
Some huge opportunities and upsides with implementing, hemp-based technologies that I think we're going to see roll out over the next several years.
Yeah, to me, there's always new industries coming out. Maybe 25 years ago, we had technology companies like Facebook, YouTube, Google, Apple, and I think hemp is the new oil. It's the new industry that's going to solve a lot of our problems. What would you say is for somebody who's, let's say somebody's interested in the hemp, either investing into the hemp industry or becoming a part of the hemp industry? What do you recommend? What's a easy gateway for people to get involved?
It's a tricky industry, just for the simple fact that there are a lot of what I like to call hemp hucksters out there that are, trying to capitalize and even, take advantage of many that are looking to get into green technologies, into renewable energies. Mm-hmm. And you see these startups pop up, raise a bunch of funding, and then disappear. Yeah. And I hear it every day. And so I would say anyone looking to either get in as an investment or get in as a farmer, etc., do your due diligence. Do your diligence. If you're farming, your genetics, your applications, your permits, make sure that you know that your crop is going to be able to be harvestable and not have to be destroyed from being too hot. There's a lot of hucksters out there shucking seeds that are, hemp seeds, and they're hot. They're going, 0.4, 0.5, 1% THC, and that results in a complete crop loss, right? Every state makes you destroy that. So from a farming aspect, make sure that you're working with ethical sources and you do your diligence. And if you're investing, obviously stay away from startups. There is plenty of companies that are out there that have technology that is developed, that is looking for funding, that are, not trying to screw the pooch, if you will. They're ethical base. So by now we're far enough along after the passage of the farm bill that these companies should have some data. They should have some abilities to provide, if it doesn't smell right, step away, right?
Right.
I've seen a lot of bad investments happen in this industry. And I have been one of the few that's been lucky to be self-sufficient. I started this in my garage and kind of self-funded it many years ago. And through smart business decisions, was able to keep that a sole proprietorship. Nice. And so, obviously later on, I did some diversifications and brought on some key partners, but not because we needed to raise money, because we wanted to build networking and relationships.
Nice.
So, again, there's a lot of companies that are going to be coming out of the woodwork with new technologies, and some of it I can't wait to invest in myself, because I think it is the future. I think from biofuels to plastics to everyday items. Porsche has now released a new Cayman that is made completely out of hemp composite.
Oh, that's awesome.
I heard that Learjet now has a hemp composite body on a jet, which is pretty next level. And so, I'm very excited. I know there's some great technologies in plastics and fuels that I've been looking into and trying to help some groups kind of get to that next level. So
now you had mentioned like hot hemp. And from my understanding, I know that there's some legislation out there to where farmers could possibly grow hemp with at least up to 1% of THC, because that's one of the, from my understanding, a roadblock for some people. If their hemp does have a little bit of THC, 0.5, 0.8, which isn't, from my understanding, isn't going to get anybody high, but, for whatever reason, they're not going to allow it. And so,
they do allow, most states have legislation or regulation in place to allow for remediation.
Okay.
In other words, if it comes in hot, it can go be extracted and processed, right, and basically made into a compliant product.
Okay.
However, we see it a lot in Oklahoma because, we are now leading the country here in marijuana, which is something I never thought I would say. Pardon me. and I don't have any interest in the marijuana businesses. I've
Yeah.
stayed very much in my lane and being a hemp researcher and a manufacturer. However, I think Oklahoma currently has about 8,000 active cultivation licenses.
Okay.
Little over 340,000, I think, was the last count, active patient licenses, which is as many as every other state in the country combined. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
One day we'll go wreck, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
with marijuana here, we've got a lot of outdoor cultivators that are growing large crops outdoors. And that presents a problem of cross-pollination with hemp producers. And of course, those guys are griping at us hemp guys, right? That, your hemp crop pollinated my, marijuana crop. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I've grown year after year outdoors. And if you have no other plants in the vicinity, pollen can travel hundreds of miles in the air. And Oklahoma is a prime state for that to happen, as it's pretty flat from I-35 west. So, pollen drift is real. And what happens is these guys get a big batch of, back that up, the hemp guys get pollen drift from the marijuana guys. Now they collect, hundreds of pounds of seed, and they ready to sell their seed next year. When that seed comes back very hot, half THC, half CBD. Now we're talking it could be 10-12% THC, which is unable to remediate. So again, verified sources on seeds goes a long ways.
Okay, got it. One of the things I'm in the solar industry. That's kind of my background. One of the things that helps the solar industry is, there's what's called an ITC tax credit, where basically, for homeowners who go solar or business owners who go solar, they get a 30% tax credit, whatever the cost is. And it's really helped drive the industry.
Absolutely.
Is there any type of tax credit that the federal government or the state of Oklahoma provides? And if not, do you think something like that would be a driver to help move forward the hemp industry?
So I'm not aware of any current grants or things specifically for hemp. There's dang sure no tax credits. Even for me being here, and I've worked on legislation every year to incorporate, hemp as a true agricultural good. And by that, I mean that the state of Oklahoma and most other states charge hemp farmers, like here, it's a $500 permit to grow hemp. They don't charge farmers to grow alfalfa or corn or any other commodity. And so we've got to get away from that. Oh, they're growing cannabis, so we're going to charge them.
Right.
That's the first stigma we have to break, is that hemp, until it's treated as a traditional agricultural good, it's going to be hard to break into that market. And of course, the forces that be have spent hundreds of millions of dollars a year lobbying and advertising against it. So it's no wonder why what would be common sense to most Americans, they're spending so much money to keep it the other way.
Yeah. And you had kind of touched on it a little bit, but from my understanding about hemp is, because technically hemp is a weed. Is that correct? Is it considered a weed?
It is considered a weed, yes.
And because of that, it requires, from my understanding, less water and really less pesticides, if any pesticides, to grow. Would that be true? Is that correct?
Absolutely. And while I will say most hemp pests love it, they eat it up, from aphids to other types of invasive garden insects. Certain types of cannabis provide certain resistance against specific insects. Again, the one that we utilize for our patent for Blue Magic holds all those 6 specific properties. So hemp is very unique in the sense that even this plant, when left alone for 80 years in the wild, it adapted and figured out that these are the bugs that are affecting me, and I'm going to produce this same complex they produce. So it had an evolution almost, if you will. And I mean, hemp does require less water. At the same time, if we want to have a, let's say, high CBD crop, if we're producing a crop for, CBD production, we want to maximize our yields. right? Just like any other farmer would. So we want to put down a light NPK ratio. We want to make sure those plants are watered, and we want to make sure that they're not being invaded by invasive pests or fungus, as that could cause a loss of overall crop.
Right.
So it is resistant. At the same time, there are many terrible pesticides that are used in hemp, especially in marijuana, right? On a regular basis. And that's why we see so much in each state, especially California, right? Anything that fails testing in California makes its way to other states. So, you know, that's another thing on the medical side of things. You know, those patients who don't have access to, you know, legal tested cannabis, that's something to keep in. You know, I mean, it's hard to go, oh yeah, this bud looks like it has pesticides on it.
Right.
Doesn't really work like that, right? So I think as the industry has evolved over the last even really just couple of years, more and more Americans are becoming aware of what they're putting in their body, not just cannabis related, but food and overall health. So I think as we see more of a transition from traditional pharmaceuticals and medications into homeopathic and allopathic routes, such as cannabis, we have to keep that in mind, that not all cannabis, as we think it's natural and safe, is natural and safe. We even see the entry over the last couple of years of the Delta 8, Delta 10, HHC, THCP, THCO. I mean, I can run down the alphabet list, right? Of these new compounds. And most of everyone I just named are not naturally found in the plant. They are being chemically synthesized and isomerized as a means around legislation, to where you can buy a 25 milligram Delta 8 THC gummy in Kansas, right? And they're saying what comes from hemp, because they started with CBD isolate, and through a chemical synthesis are able to produce Delta 8 or even Delta 9 THC, which is what we think of when we think of marijuana, right? Or THC. But it's not the same if it's chemically synthesized. Our bodies don't react to it the same. Some of the time it rejects it. And so in Oklahoma, for example, in 2021, we had a little over 900 adverse effects reported for marijuana to 911. In 2022, when we just got this study back last year, there was almost 3,000 adverse events. And we didn't have any more weed here we went legal in 2018. So there was no more weed in 21 than there was in 22. What's the differentiating factor? Enter the scene of all of these Delta 8 vape pens and all this junk in every convenience store and smoke shop across the state. Now you've got a spike of over 300% in adverse effects. So we're starting to see regulation in every state, including California, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, at regulating those synthesized products and even outlawing them, because they're not natural and there's no efficacy to say they're safe.
Right. No, that's good stuff. That's a lot. You know, people aren't realizing how much, how much stuff is going into cannabis, you know, in terms of chemicals and stuff. So, you know, I'm glad you brought that up. Have you ever heard, you know, obviously our financial system was once on a gold standard. Have you heard of people trying to bring it to what's called a hemp standard, our financial system?
Yeah, I've seen some ramblings about utilizing hemp as a commodity to base a global value, you know, much as we do off the oil standard, thanks to Mr. Nixon there. And so, you know, I stay pretty involved in what's going on a political climate. I always like to tell everyone I've been a registered independent since 2007. Awesome. I've written legislation, and I've written bipartisan legislation on almost all of my bills. So I approach everything I look at from an independent standpoint, a non-biased view, but from an American who understands our Constitution, who understands why it was written, what it was written for, and who also understands that we live in a different time today. right? That we are not in the same world we were in then, and that obviously certain things have to change. And I think that both sides of the aisle want to make their point as extreme as they can, and disregard everything in the middle. I think most Americans fall somewhere in the middle, and probably lie on an independent line, though they feel like they have to affiliate with one or the other. So
yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that right there. I mean, I ran for Congress as an independent for that exact reason. And I do think it's kind of where the country's going. I think people are kind of fed up with the duopoly. And now from what are some of the, I mean, you did talk about, so a hot weed or a hot hemp seed being a problem. What are some of the major issues that are preventing the hemp industry from moving forward? Like if you had to say, what are the top three right now?
Well, I will say with industrial complex, right, with textiles and industrials, there's a lot of lobbying money going into keeping hemp out, and it has been since the 20s. So until those companies get their hands on the right technologies, and every one of them is looking into it, they're all spending mass amounts of R&D dollars, from Monsanto and Bayer and Syngenta, DuPont, Dow Chemical. I can run down the list, right? They're all researching and how they can get ahead and get a green technology to market. Some of them are already producing them. Some of them are, again, actively seeking intake. When it comes to the food, as far as hemp as a food, because hemp produces more protein than just about any other seed. The protein from hemp comes from the seed itself. Than any other thing on it's like 65 to 68% protein content. So hemp seed could feed the world. Right. And all non-GMO, all no glyphosate free. And I mean, we look at America and even the globe as a whole. In America specifically, there's a reason why we consume 90+% of the world's pharmaceutical medication, yet make up less than 10% of the population. That number just kind of hits me in the head, like, damn, V8 slap, right? Why is that? Well, one example, the FDA in America approves high fructose corn syrup for use in human consumption. And we are the only country in the world to do so.
Wow.
Mexico, that is why sodas taste so much better when they're from Mexico in the glass bottle. Because they're made with sugar. There's no high fructose corn syrup in it. Which also means we're not getting the glyphosates that are carried over from the processing of the corn. So until the FDA puts Americans' health first, right? Then that's going to be a problem, and that leads us to the third thing with the medical side. CBD is being used. We know it's effective at treating pediatric epilepsy. We also know it's being used as a supplement to treat almost everything that's wrong with everybody. And that falls back to, I believe we have a deficiency, right? I don't believe cannabis cures anything. I think we all suffer from a deficiency. And then if we had a daily supplement of cannabis, hemp, specifically cannabidiol, in our diets, it would prevent a lot of today's ailments that we see suffering with society, from type 2 diabetes. I'm working with Governor Josh Green in Hawaii currently on drafting legislation that will be an emergency act to allow efficacious CBD products to be paid for by the state in place of diabetic medication for type 2 diabetics. The studies are out that show CBD is extremely effective in normalizing glucose levels and A1Cs in type 2 diabetics. And so the governor is on board, and there's a massive diabetic medication shortage, mainly due to Ozempic, because everyone thinks it's going to take pounds off of them. And while it does, I wouldn't say it's a healthy way. So, alternative supplements that are, if the studies are out and the governments are going, hey, we know this works, why won't the FDA acknowledge it? And again, that comes down to who funds the FDA and who they're policing for. So until that changes, It's going to be hard to see CBD and cannabis in general. Even that's why the FDA won't recognize medical marijuana. They'd rather see it as recreational, because then they don't have to write a prescription for it. Right? It doesn't coincide with their other clients. So, I think those are the three biggest factors that we will see change in the near future. And that'll be a turning point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you're very politically involved. You're working with a lot of different people. Do you ever see yourself actually running for office somewhere?
So funny you ask. I am currently looking at running for a local House seat in my district,
that's awesome.
where I can pioneer some change right here at home.
For
2026. Haven't committed to that. It's going to depend on where I'm at in my entrepreneurial life. If I can break away from some of the businesses that I have and devote my time to constituents, but it is very much part of my plan. One term. That's it. They will hear me.
Absolutely. Well, you just gave me a bunch of knowledge. I thought I knew a lot about hemp, and then I talked to you, and you just kind of blew my mind on a lot of different things. I do want to just say thank you so much for coming on this podcast and telling us about hemp and some of the challenges. But one other thing too, we've talked about the challenges. What are things that people can do locally to help the hemp industry? I mean, is there anything that you wish people did more of to help build this industry, or any recommendations for people?
I mean, every state is legal now to grow hemp in. Even if your state doesn't have a program, you can apply through the USDA to grow hemp under USDA license. And so anyone that, wants to get familiarized with that, any farmers that are currently growing other crops that want to look at hemp as a rotational crop or something, I tell everyone, don't look at it as I'm going to go out and make a bunch of money by selling my crop. Right. We need to look at it as I need to get familiarized. I need to do the research. I need to know how to grow this crop, because one day there will be mass contracts for hemp. I think that's the most important thing, is to familiarize with the industry and then pick out where you want to be a part of it.
Got it. And because I know you got a couple businesses, how could people reach out and see what you're doing? I think there's the farmerryan.com is your website. And is that primarily where they can go to and kind of see what you're doing?
That's a great site. I've got a lot of different sites that filter out of that. Some of the video from back when we were out hunting the landrace hemp in 2018 and 19 is on there. And so farmerryan.com is a great place to go. They can also visit bluemagicnaturals.com, which will give them a little more information about the people, pet, and plant products that we have utilized that specific sesquiterpene compound and taken those products to market to combat DEET and other products like natural sunscreens with pest repellents, etc.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast here. I wish you the best with everything you're doing with hemp. If there's anything I could ever help you with if you do decide to run, let me know. Please feel free to reach out, and keep up the fight.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I will continue searching the past to grow a brighter future for everyone.
Awesome. All right, Ryan. Well, I wish you the best out there in Oklahoma, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me, Fernando. You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.